Holy Ghost, Holy Ghost, I need you, I need grace, I need more. Oremosito, I cannot do it by myself. I cannot do it by myself. Oh, sit up, alive.
What up, O team? Welcome to another video of Doing, Being, Becoming, where we aim to inform, impact, influence, and inspire. I am Asisipo, your occupational therapist, and first of all, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has been continuing to engage. We see your likes, we see your comments, we see your subscriptions, and yeah, so thank you very much. So this video is actually inspired by the students who come in and out of the clinic, doing their clinical placements there, and it just reminded me a lot of the time that I was a student and the different experiences that I encountered in my placements. So today I'm actually going to share one of the not so great experiences. Not so great is actually an understatement, because I'm going to be sharing my worst clinical experience. So keep watching. Okay, so my worst clinical experience was actually in third year, and it was at Tygerberg Hospital. It was during the burns placement, and there are quite a few things actually that made this placement not so great. I think first of all, it being indicative in the placement itself that I was in the burns unit. So naturally they call it people were burning. People were burning for real. Yeah, so I think just the placement itself was symbolic of a lot of what I would go through, but as they say that what do they say about diamonds and fire? Yeah, like through the burning we are molded, and I don't know what else. But anyway, let me just take it back a few steps. So I think the things that made this block really the worst, first of which is that it was a physical placement, and I don't know if it was a mental block or ganye. There were other things about it being a physical setting that made it so difficult, but because already by that time I already known that I don't like physical's not for me, I'm not going to end up in physical. So that could have created like a mental block where I shut myself off from fully engaging, with the setting. Or that, even despite me having made that conclusion for myself, but there were other factors that may have contributed to it not being a great placement, right? I think it's the latter. But yeah, so I think it was that, that there may have been a mental block, but also because I think just like the supervisors went it, man, and not that them themselves didn't do what they were supposed to do. I think they did their job adequately because it's I passed, but I do think that they weren't really beyond the academic scope. They weren't really able to help me with what I needed, like the support that I needed. And I don't know if that was their responsibility or not, or maybe I was expecting more from them beyond what they could give me. But yeah, I think it's a combination of that mental block, the supervisors, and also I just felt like the idea of having a clinical partner is great, because obviously when you're in placements you have a clinical partner, you guys are supposed to support each other and help each other through the block, and that's great, but I think also whether it was a pressure that I added to myself or an external pressure, but I feel like it added a covert competition, which I really didn't need at the time. But yeah, for all those main reasons, it really just was not a great time. And I actually remember key events that really contributed to it being a very nasty 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and sakumbule. It felt like forever. Number one was just like the patient load, right? And the kind of patients that you do see. Because it is a burns block, I personally feel like there is no injury that is worse than burns, right? Because also, like, while we were in there, we noticed that there was a certain demographic that was, you know, coming into that unit as patients, right? It was most of the time mostly Black people of a low socioeconomic standing, and obviously it was during winter, right? And it was because of the socioeconomics that contributed mostly to them being patients in that ward. So because their basic needs weren't correctly met, it put them at higher risk of being patients. For example, their housing wasn't that great. So a lot of the people that were living there, right? And obviously being a Kyojombeni, there are other things that we would expect would come from that, right? So poor sanitation, poor electricity, poor like warming systems, right? So a lot of the time, because it's during winter and Gyabanda and Hlala Ecangcini, obviously it's hella cold. So how do these people warm themselves up? Over open fire, okanye over a two burner. And a lot of these they create potential risk for burns, because a child would come in, uchenjani, no, they tripped over a two burner, okanye they ran over a stove, wacha umntana either through the stove or kanye ngamanzi. I remember this one child who was a patient of mine. He was 16, right? So just moving slightly away from the socioeconomics and more on just the cultural dynamics and how that can contribute to a person being a patient in that ward. This child was 16, and you know, he wasn't actually of age to ukuya esutwini, but he forced himself waya uyokoluka wabaleka kwabo, went to initiation school, and you know, on one unfortunate night iyabalisa ke bebelele actually ebomeni, and you know, the tent just caught fire, and it caught fire emnyango. So obviously if a tent catches fire emnyango uzobalekela how awuzokwazi ubaleka. So that's how he sustained his burns, and it was like bad burns. And now we think about it, you know, so now, you know, he was trying to go through this rite of passage which would make him more acceptable or accepted in his social circles, and you know, that backfired, excuse the pun, and that ended very badly for him, right? Because now he sustained bad burns, and it was obviously on his hands, okay? And already he was a child who was behind eskolweni. So now you're behind eskolweni already. I think he was still in his lower grades, and he was 16, which meant he should have been in high school. Still in his lower grades, and how he sustained burns. And burns, we would also know that take time, right? So it takes time. While usesibhedlele, can be months before you get discharged, and it's months and years of recovery, and now you have all this time also that's contributing to you falling more behind eskolweni, right? So already we see how the impact of the cultural societal pressure and also this incident now contributes to the delay that his life is going to have in the long term. Another example of a patient that I saw was this lady who I was doing admission yake, and I'm there, you know, just going through her file, doing her admission, and the nurse comes to me, or she comes up to the bed, and she's like, can you smell that? And I'm like, what? And she's like, it smells like death. So, trigger warning, by the way, a lot of these may be quite triggering, so sorry if you can't handle, and you know, you can come back to the next video or watch my other videos. I'll understand. Yeah, so she says it smells like death, and I was like, say. I mean, you know, unfortunately, that particular lady did die like a few hours later. But, you know, it's just like unexpected things like that where you really just encounter death all the time. And because it was burns, right? So sometimes the burns were through inhalation, or kanye, there were 3rd-degree burns. But a lot of the time we'd see people in ICU and have to treat them in ICU. And maybe that would be another video for another day of what is the role of occupational therapy in ICU. What's the role of occupational therapy with burns, right? Coming. Those are videos potentially be coming. Yeah, so just like the nature of patients we're seeing was also actually very scary, and just like very shocking, right? It's a very unique and traumatic clinical picture, right? I remember another patient that I saw, who was my exam patient. So with him, he also, had sustained really bad burns. A lot of the lower extremities were burnt, which also meant that he had to do a lot of skin grafting, which also just, contributes to the how long you are actually admitted, because skin grafting is a whole another process and procedure, and now those healing can also take some time. But it's also seeing just like the social circumstances that the people are exposed to before they are burned, and then also like how difficult the recovery actually is, because a lot of them, especially if it's in a home fire, everything burns, right? And now everything is burnt. Paper alcohol are burnt, the ID alcohol is burnt, and if you want to apply for a grant, you need an ID, right? So how are you going to apply for an ID? No, if you need, how are you going to apply for a grant if on your ID alcohol burnt in the fire? So it's like painful things like those that you get to experience. Back to this exam patient. So this exam patient that I was seeing, and it's also seeing like the complexity of the injury, because a lot of the time they would suffer from depression, because of the loss that they had experienced, the trauma that they had experienced, depression that can come from prolonged pain, because prolonged pain and stress can make one susceptible to depression, being in hospital for long periods of time, and just having your vocation and just like your occupational engagement and fulfillment taken from you. But also a lot of them, especially with this particular patient that I was seeing, he wasn't getting any visitation, right? And because of the change in your roles that burns can bring, right? Because it changed a lot about your physical capabilities. If things like your legs and your hands are burnt, your self-esteem also is greatly affected, because now indlela obukeka ngayo is different. Now you have to get used to this new picture of yourself, right? And a lot of them just get abandoned and left isolate in hospitals, and especially during a traumatic time like that, everyone needs support, right? So those are things that contributed to it being a horrible block. Just experiencing and empathizing with the pain of what's actually happening with these patients. And with this particular exam patient, I was trying to get him to engage in this activity, and it was like, and I was like, that is so true. That is so true. Like, I will never be able to relate to the pain that you're experiencing on the physical level, on an emotional level. I'll never be able to relate, right? But also what really contributed to the difficulty of this block was just like the lack of cooperation between the MDT, like between the team, right? So you'd have like the session plan. This actually happened with one of my it wasn't an exam, but it was a midterm. So I prepared for this midterm, and I put up the sign asking that the patient not get moved, because obviously if we are hlanja, they change dressings, they can't do anything for the rest of the day, because they're in pain. So I put up this notice, and I communicate to the nurses, like, can you please not move this patient, because I need them for my midterm, I'm getting marked. What happens? They move the patient. Yeah. It was testing. It was testing. And now you have to adapt, overcome, improvise. Like, what am I going to do with a patient who is in pain, who is crying like a baby, and I'm supposed to do something with him, and it's also like that feeling of just like helplessness and powerlessness, because like even the supervisor, I can see, but this is what's happening, literally I can't do anything, but they expect you to do something, right? So what are we going to do? Are we going to do some pain management, just some relaxation, doing some distraction, so that they're able to deal with the pain. So just like things like that, and it happened so many times. And then the supervisor gets mad at you, and I'm just like, how are you mad at me when I did all in my power? And it's so because of all of that, and just like the constant anxiety that I was experiencing all the time, like I was in a constant state of anxiety. Like even just thinking about it now just like brings back butterflies in my stomach. So because of all of that, and just feeling like I couldn't actually go to my supervisor for help, maybe it was her, maybe it was me, I don't know, but just feeling like I need to do everything right, but like I what is the right thing to do? So because of that, I wasn't like performing well, and also just like the pressure of this clinical work, and then there's like the written work, and it's just like, wow, I am crumbling underneath all this pressure. I feel myself turning into ash. So because of that, I just wasn't really like performing well, and it was tough. It was tough. There's like a few times I was just like, yo, I'm giving up. Like if there's a block that I'm going to fail, it's going to be this one, and I don't even mind. Like really, at some point, really at some point, I was contemplating in my mind or facing the reality that, listen, Lena, a block, we're gonna do it over, and it's okay, and it's okay. I really wow. I just remember that it really went that bad that I was just like really facing the reality that we'll redo this block, and when we redo it, we will pass it. Wow. And I remember, I don't know what happened, but I came across this song by Tygerberg, and Holy Ghost Air. That song became my song of decree. I would proclaim that song. I was just like, God, I really just need you to help me now. Like, I really just need you to help me now, because it's not popping. It's not coming together. And I'd really just like spend like time just like praying, and just having like positive affirmations, man, I can do this. I think what like the icing on top of this whole flop of a cake is or was not being able to attend my sister's graduation. So my sister graduated around the same time when I was in this block, and her graduating means that my family came over, and it was a beautiful time. It was a festive time, and I wasn't able to attend her graduation because I had to be at clinical. And I don't know if it was the fact that I was missing this huge milestone, or the fact that I felt trapped in not being able to join in the festivities, or the fact that myself, I was going through the most and I needed that support. And the one time that my family was actually able to be there to support me, I wasn't able to be with them. I don't know if it's one of those three or kind of the combination of all of those that really frustrated me. I remember this one time I came back home from clinical and just threw myself on my bed and just started crying, because I was just like, I just feel so isolated, because my family's here. They're literally a few kilometers away, but I can't, because I have to be here and be, this student who performs and does these clinical miracles. And right now, I can't even perform one. But yeah, all's well that ends well. And I actually remember the day that it ended, and it ended in my exam. And my angel in this whole hell of a mess was Jerome Fredericks, who's actually one of my favorite lecturers. I love him so much. But he was my exam supervisor, and I don't know if it was the fact that at that point I'd build up confidence and tolerance towards all the pressure and all that was expected, or the fact that I'd surrendered to the fact that hi Jonga, it is what it is. I think also at that point I was just prayed up You know, I was like prayed up, I was wearing the full armor. Or the fact that I was just like, listen, it is what it is. But I remember just going into the exam and, you know, doing the best that I could. The exam itself wasn't, you know, difficult, and I felt like the answers or the questions, you know, I answered, you know, quite well. And at the end of it, it was just him being able to give that affirmation, no, like, don't worry, like, you got it. Yeah, the day that I walked out of that block, I was like, so independent in the morning. Wow. So it's really like when I see students now, right, I think about that clinical experience in third year and also my physical experience in fourth year, which wasn't really bad, you know. It really wasn't bad compared to the third year experience, but gate was still physical, so I still found it like quite challenging. So, you know, it's when I see students, it's being reminded of those times and just being like, yo, Sisuka Kude, like, really. And just reminding myself that, listen, I worked for my stripes, okay? I worked for my stripes, and I didn't just wake up here. I didn't just wake up like this. So, yeah, I just hope that it becomes a reminder also for you as an OT, you as a physio, speech, doctor, whoever you are watching this, and just reminding yourself that wherever you are, you didn't wake up there. Like, you went through things, you know, to get to that point. And hopefully that you can actually celebrate yourself for all the victories and for the hardships. And even in those hardships, just remembering that, like, what's the song? I just got reminded of the song New Wine. In the crushing, in the pressing, hey, new wine is being made. That no matter the hardships, no matter the difficulties, that, you know, all comes together to create like a beautiful something in the end, you know. Because now even though I know that, like, I would not choose to work in a physical setting, I know that I can, you know, and all the lessons also that came with that, and the reality shocks that, like, listen, people's realities are really tough out there. So yeah, I guess I shared all this, like I said at the beginning, because I got reminded of my own clinical experience through watching the current students that we have, but also just to say that, you know, like, as clinicians, we need to be honest with ourselves that, like, yeah, it's not always rosy. So whether it was during the time when we were students or even now as practicing clinicians, that kubalit sometimes, you know, kubalit from our end and feeling like our hands are tied, kubalit from the people that we are working under, kubalit from the, you know, surroundings that we are, or the circumstances that we are working under, right? So whether it's the social issues that we are trying to, you know, overcome with the patients, or just the presentation and the complex presentations that, you know, patients come with. But yeah, it's just to say that, like, we didn't wake up like this. We didn't wake up like this, like, kuba tough, kuba tense, you know. And when you do feel like, it's just this degree, it's just that, oh, I'm just here, or I've been doing this for so long, or, you know, like, it's not that big of a deal. It's a big deal. It's a big deal, because at some point, you know, it was touch and go. So maybe in one of the videos I'll share my best experiences, which I'd love to share, but yeah, so please do comment with your experiences, your best experiences, your worst experiences, anything that you were reminded of while you're watching the video, and please share this with the relevant people. Share this with anyone who you know is doing their clinical block at the moment, so that they can be encouraged, you know, that, like, it's rough right now, but you will go through. The Lord will see you through. You will make it. You really will make it. So that's all from me. Until the next time, oh team, let's continue to do the best to do, be, and become. Bye.